Hi, welcome back to Leaving the Lies and Telling Your Truth. In part one of this episode, I had ended it with a question. I'll go ahead and repeat the question, and Melody, if you will give us your answer. Did you have any suspicions that there was any physical or sexual abuse cases going on while you were in the house of Yahweh?
Okay, are we going with both adult and children, or strictly children?
We can go with both if you want to.
My first suspicion, which ended up being confirmed, was with an adult, and it was a husband beating the wife. And I was upset, and when I witnessed the scene of them fighting out in the middle of the road, and I called an elder, and they said they would handle it. They did come over, and they did talk to the husband, they did talk to the wife, but yet it didn't. I don't see where what they did help, because they didn't separate them and give them different counseling. They didn't. All they did was tell him, "Don't do that," and tell her, "He's your head. That you pretty much have to tolerate it, but we'll work with him." That was the first time I actually saw some abuse going on. There was
Wow.
another situation where a man was actually being abused by his wife.
Mm.
Oh, wow.
He was actually meaner than the husband that was beating his wife. But they separated
Mm.
and told them they needed some time apart. They needed to go to couples counseling and all. So that's the way I felt like the first one should have been handled.
Now,
It
do you
didn't.
think that was handled differently because it was the wife who was being abusive in the second situation?
Probably. But then after that,
Wow.
other situations, that's how I saw it handled. There weren't. I'm not saying there were a whole lot of them, but probably as much as any other organization has, if not more.
Right.
Um, and then there was a couple of situations where a couple of teenage girls were being bullied. I guess would be the situation to use. And to
Okay.
me, that's abuse.
Right.
And they were being bullied by adult men, not boys their own age.
Mm.
And there was that situation, but that was handled, I felt, appropriately too. The boys were taken to their parents, said, these are your sons, deal with them, but they are not to touch the girls again. They are not to have anything to do with the girls again. So that I felt was handled appropriately. Now, where all the hush hush got is when it came to children.
Mm.
Okay, without naming any names, there was one young man. Well, I'm gonna tell you, to you, he probably wasn't a young man because he was probably your age.
Okay.
To me, he was a young man. Um, it was found there were a couple of young ladies that he was having inappropriate with,
Wow.
and they didn't even ask him to leave. They didn't call authorities. He was talked to. I won't say he was, and he did, like, between feasts. He was scarce to be seen, but he was still in the Abilene area. It wasn't like they sent him away. And then there were a couple of situations where couples actually left when they found out their daughters were being abused. And in the position medical, yeah, I had my suspicions, but couldn't prove them. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And if you have anything to do with out there, it's a different story. But in the world, if you suspect it and can't prove it, you still need to report it
Right.
and let the authorities prove it.
Right.
But I don't think that I know that didn't happen because they don't call the authorities out there for anything unless it's to help them. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? If it's to
So,
help somebody else, no.
when you suspected the abuse on the children, I think.
Oh, we lost your voice for a minute. Your audio's gone, Autumn. Okay, we can hear you now. Oh, no, no. We can't. Where did your volume go? Okay, you sound really faded. I can hear you very faintly. No. Should we
Now
start
I've
over?
got you.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Now I can hear you. I was just going to say,
It's
should we start
whenever
over?
I ask an important question, I go mute.
That is weird.
It is. So, Melody, what I was asking you was, I already think I know the answer to this, but I just want to see if I'm correct. When you suspected abuse in a child, you didn't go to the authorities, but did you go to your authority, Yisrael, and let him know?
Well, usually when it came to like abuse and stuff, I went to my counselors, and
Okay.
they went to their counselors who went to Israel. And I'll be honest, if I didn't feel like it made it to Israel, that somebody didn't think it was important enough to, then I would go to Israel. But a lot of times, if it got reported to Israel that I complained, he would call me in and talk to me, so I would
Okay.
know it got reported.
Right.
Right. And his response to you was?
Was usually, can you prove it? Which you can't always prove it. You know what
Right.
I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
Without that child being physically examined by a physician who is trained to see these things,
Right.
you can't prove it. But usually, if I suspected, I would have to, and he would call me in. I would tell him everything I'd heard, everything I'd done, everything I felt, and then he would deal with it from there. But I still don't think they handled it the way it should be handled,
Right.
because there was never, could there have been punishment done to the man? Yeah, it's a possibility, because as a female, I would never know that,
Right.
you know. But so I don't know, I think when it finally got to the point that somebody was able to prove it, it went to the authorities.
Okay.
But you did what you could do within the means of you doing something, unlike other people who may have just swept it under the rug and said nothing.
Yeah, that's pretty much because when I feel like by this time, when this the one time that last winter came along, I was under such a microscope
Mm.
by the Kahans and everybody that if I had gone to the authorities, they would have. I don't know how to explain this without making me look like I'm stupid, because I'm not stupid. Um, Here's how it goes: when you're in there and your head's gone and you're a single female, you pretty much have to, or I had to, be careful what I said and did, because I was constantly been called in by the counselors and the elders, because somebody reported this or somebody reported that. It's like people were looking for reasons to cause problems.
Right.
So I would go to, in a couple of situations when I was up there, I wish I had gone over the elders and gone to the authorities.
Right.
But it was because, to me, you're talking about abuse in this section. And to me, when somebody has a serious physical, mental illness, and you refuse to let anybody in a position, including that female or male's partner, to go seek help for them, that is abuse.
Right.
I think even the world calls it neglect, medical neglect, but it's the
Right.
same thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Same thing. It's abuse. And as with the medical background that I have, I think that there were several deaths of men, women, and children that could have been prevented. I'm not calling anybody a murderer. I'm not calling anybody anything bad. I'm just saying, if they would have let that person seek a physician when they first got sick, then they might still be alive.
Right. Right.
Okay,
And now they'll never know because they
and they'll
didn't
never know.
give them those people that opportunity.
Yeah, they took away, basically, in the scriptures. It says that the Father gives us a choice to choose righteousness or evil. They took that choice away from them. And I'm not saying going to the medical profession is evil. I'm just saying it should have been their choice to seek help or not seek help.
Right.
And the house took that choice away from them.
Right, because basically they were kind of put in a position where they were being taught or told or conditioned that if you choose medical help, you're choosing to not put your faith in Yahweh.
Yes, that is what they
So
teach.
you're better, they basically gave the message, you're better off to die. You're better off to die and have your faith than to seek medical help and maybe survive or have your life.
That's pretty much what they teach, and I understand they still pretty much teach that. I've been out for a few years, so I don't know all of what they teach today, but I hear
Right.
things here and there.
Well, I can't speak to all of the cases, but I can speak to one case because it was my mother.
Mm.
My mother was a nurse. She was a very, very smart woman. She knew her medical business and she knew it well. She had breast cancer. And Mel, correct me if I'm wrong, or you don't even have to say anything. She had known 2 years before it had gotten so bad that she had breast cancer. And she was told, and the reason why I know this is because she shared this with me. She was told if she went and got medical treatment, then her trust was not in Yahweh, and that she had sin in her life, and that's why she had this cancer. I will tell you this about Hazel, and I will speak her name because she deserves this. She was in so much pain, and we had just moved to Georgia, and I begged and pleaded with her to please go to the doctor. It was because she was in Kansas with her family. Thank God for my aunt that made her go to the doctor, and that the cancer had metastasized, if I'm correct, if I remember correctly, had metastasized to her kidneys, and they had to put stents in her kidneys. It was months after that that she was dead. I thankfully enough bucked the system and went and saw her in October. And Hazel was not a big woman to begin with, and she was so very tiny. At this point, the cancer had eaten her up, and she was laying in the bed, and it was at one of her weakest moments. And I remember this like it was yesterday. And for those that are watching, Hazel was not a weak woman by any means to anybody who met her. I mean, she may have been small, but when she spoke, men listened to her.
I listened to her.
Yeah, yeah, and here she was in her bed, eaten up with cancer. And I remember she turned to me, and our relationship at this point was, I don't want to say strained, but I had been out of the house, and she was dealing with the whole guilt of being in the house and that I wasn't in the house. And it was just a whole thing. But I remember she grabbed my hand and she said, I'm not a sinner. I never sinned against your father. I've kept my faith. And I'm going to tell you right now, for whatever differences Hazel and I may have had, if I always knew growing up, before the house Yahweh or not, if anybody was making it into heaven, it was Hazel. And for them to have told her that killed me. And I will say this, and I don't care who listens to this, they killed her. They killed her. They told her not to seek the help she needed for breast cancer.
In the end, didn't she end up in hospice?
She did, because a fit was thrown.
Because when my niece was dying from, she was a child and she was dying from cancer. She was in the room on one end of the floor, and your mom was in the room on the other end.
Mm.
Yes.
Yes.
She was in hospice less than 24 hours when she had passed.
I did that too. Because I got to see her. I didn't even know she was in hospice because, you know, by this time I'm out. I didn't even know she had gotten that bad. And then it was actually the day she passed, I ran into, I want to say it was your sister-in-law,
Lisa.
In the hallway, and she told me where she was, and I walked down to the other end of the hall. Didn't she die on like the 1st of January?
Yes. No, it was the second.
Second.
Yes,
I knew it was after the first.
It was on Bill and Ben's birthday. It was the second.
But she died. She passed, and then less than 24 hours after that, my niece passed.
Wow.
And so you won't say it. You'll be nice, but I'll say it, and I'll say it to those that are listening. Is cancer deadly? It can be, but if you catch it in time, it doesn't have to be.
So it can be very treatable.
Because I am a breast cancer survivor.
I didn't know that about you, Melody.
Yeah, I survived breast cancer in 86 and 88.
Wow.
So I know it's treatable, and
Right.
here I am now, what, 20 some odd years later, and I'm still kicking.
Right.
But yeah, it's that's my thing. If people, if she was gone to when she first realized it, because Hazel's smart enough to have picked up on the signs in the beginning. If she had gone then, who knows? She might still be with us today. Then who knows? The father makes the decision when it's your time to go. It's
Right.
not your decision. So it makes
Right.
it's just the way things go, and that's why I want to stress so bad. If you suspect you have something serious, find out what it is, because there are ways to treat it. Because even now, if you want to treat it according to by natural method, there are hospitals throughout the United States that will do it either way you want.
Right.
You go to that hospital, they will treat you by using the herbs and natural remedies, or they will treat you through the
And
normal
and
way.
that advice right there could be the difference between life and death for somebody. So I appreciate you even offering up that information and letting anybody
Yes.
who's watching to know that, who may not even know that that's an option or that's available.
It is available. I can't remember
And
the
I,
name of them.
and I didn't mean to hijack your
Oh, you're fine. You're fine. Because I'm gonna say right up, I agree with you. And she's not the only one I agree with that about.
Right. I agree.
right, and I agree, and I can't say their names, but I can speak for Hazel
Right.
She's your mom.
because she was my mother. So I'm sorry.
That's okay. We're going to go on to the next question. And Mel, we're asking you this question also kind of based on your medical education. We know that the House of Yahweh, we've heard that the House of Yahweh is advising their members to do different cleanses. And I know that you were involved in some of these, or was still a member when some of these happened. Can you tell us what you know about some of these cleanses? Do you think they're necessary? Do you think any of them are potentially dangerous?
Okay. A cleanse. Okay. If in the world today, if you were to get a book and say you were going to go on the master cleanse, that's a cleanse the world does.
Right.
It'll tell you to check with your physician before you do it.
Right.
Because there can be situations. Yes, there were a lot of cleanses that we went on while we were out there. There was one we did with the nastiest thing. No, maybe it wasn't the worst. With the 35% hydrogen peroxide. You start out with a couple of drops in your water, and then you add a couple of drops for 3 days, and you have. Okay, I think I made it to 4 drops and couldn't do it. It made me sick. On the other hand, my husband made it all the way through it, and it never made him sick. And there are a lot of people who did it, and 35% hydrogen peroxide can be very dangerous. That's industrial strength. When considering that what you use at home in the normal situations is like 5 or 9%, depending on something like that.
Wow.
35% is a big difference. You're looking almost half. So you have to be very dangerous. And we did one called the walnut hull tincture. So we put 2 or 3 drops of this walnut hull tincture. I did read up on that a little bit, and it's one of those that it's going to be dangerous if done wrong. If you follow the directions, it should be okay. The next one that was done, but these are not in order. These are just the ones I remember. And I'll be honest with you and tell you, I talked to a couple of people because I couldn't remember the name of some of them. I could remember this cleanse, but I couldn't remember what it was called. Then we did this juice cleanse. And I will tell you, of all the cleanses, it was probably the best one I ever did. It was probably the healthiest for everybody. And that's just basically where you followed a recipe, you juiced the juices, and you drank like 4 quarts of it a day. But it's just like V8 juice.
Right.
Oh, okay.
So you just throw a couple of things in it other than, because it has like carrots and apples and all that kind of stuff in it. Excuse me.
So that one probably didn't have anything in it that was potentially dangerous. It was just basically fruits and vegetables turned into a juice, right?
Yeah. That one was probably would probably be very healthy because for so many days you only do the juice, and then you can add fruits and vegetables or not juice to it, and it's like a 45-day thing.
Where that's
Like,
all
so
you eat for 45?
all or coffee?
I got a cat getting this stuff, huh?
I can't have chocolate or coffee on this cleanse?
Yeah, that's probably what caused me the biggest problem. No chocolate. coffee back then I could have done without. Now I love coffee, but back then I could have done
Oh.
without it. Then we did one that had the uh, buffalo gore tea, and I I didn't do that one. I started out doing it, but the stuff tasted so horrible that I just couldn't make myself drink it. And then they did one was also the buffalo gore, but it was the beans. But I'll be honest, I don't remember exactly what they did with those because I think that was about the time I was leaving.
Mel's got a visitor. I love it.
I love it. I love it, Melody. That is so cute.
I have a cat that had kittens, and it was so hot here when they were born that I brought them into the house. And now I'm afraid to put them back outside because the last time I put kittens this little outside, all the wild creatures ate them.
Aw.
Oh, look at you. You're a caregiver not only to humans but also to the animals.
Absolutely.
Bye,
I love
animals.
it. So, Melody, was Shaul's death, was it a surprise to you? And do you think that his death was caused by the pigweed cleanse?
Okay. One of the things you have to learn about any herb or any tincture, or anything you're going to take, you have to learn that all of them, if not done correctly, can be dangerous. But some of them, see, this is where you get back to the physician thing. That's why on these cleanses at the World House, the first thing that's on it says, seek your, be sure you're okay and you physically can handle this before you do it. Now, this particular cleanse I'd never heard of. We did some looking up on it after we heard about Shoals, and then I understand there was another lady who died because of it, or possibly because of it. And according to it, if there was an underlying health issue, then yes, it could have been the cause of the death. Because it's not really the cause; it was the trigger. Because
Right.
there's an underlying health condition, this particular cleanse might have triggered his condition that caused his death.
Right.
That's why you should never do these serious, because some of these cleanses are serious cleanses. Some of them, I'll be honest, before the house I never even heard of.
Right.
But the serious, even the juice cleanse when I was on it, when we were doing that, if you detox too fast, okay, it can cause you problems, even if you're basically healthy. Because
Wow, I didn't know that.
I was drinking the juice cleanse, and I drove to work one day, and I honestly don't remember how I got there because I had a dizzy spell because I had to stop the car and everything. And I talked to this is an official business, so I can say it. This cleanse came through Dr. Christopher, so we contacted his company and talked to them. And though they do not recommend food, meats and stuff, because I think they're a total vegetable, couldn't even say that right, business, they did recommend that I add poultry, no other meat, just poultry. That my body was detoxing too fast, and that's why I was putting out so many toxins. It was making me sick.
Wow.
And that's what I
Oh,
did.
wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So Mel, I mean, Melody, you know that basically we've already kind of covered the fact that most people there don't seek outside medical treatments. So having said that and knowing that and then putting it together with this question about the cleanse, most people there would not even necessarily be aware that they had a pre-existing condition that may put them at risk if they do some of these cleanses. Would you say that's a fair statement?
Yeah, because like I say, you have to know yourself. A lot of people say, "Well, I know my body. I know what I can tolerate, what I can." Not if you're throwing stuff into it you never even heard of.
Right.
Because half of those people probably, like I'd never heard of the buffalo gore. They probably never heard of pigweed. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
If you don't know what, if you don't, in other words, before they take it, if they're not going to see a physician, they need to really investigate it and be sure it's safe to take.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure if they investigated, they found that particular weed or whatever might be difficult with somebody who has a heart condition. Because I think that was what happened with the Shoal situation. He probably had an underlying heart condition because it has something to do with her heart and being cleansing and all that. I don't know, but they need to be careful.
Right.
Was his death surprising to you? I mean, it was shocking to me.
Yes, only because he was so young. I mean, granted to you, he's the same age, a little older to me, he was young.
Right.
And from what I could tell, he was always pretty healthy looking. I mean,
Yeah.
I hadn't seen him in years. I think I ran into him one time after I left the house, but I haven't seen him since. So I don't know how his health was before this. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
advice: always check out what you're being cleansed. Just by investigating it doesn't mean you're not following the rules they're setting up. There's no law. There's no biblical law about checking it out.
Right.
Just like there's no biblical law against asking questions. You have the right to ask questions so you can do an informed consent.
Right.
And
So
so that, go ahead.
no, I appreciate that. I was just gonna say I was gonna ask why you ultimately ended up leaving the house of Yahweh.
Uh, Come on, Cleo. um, Basically, there were several things. One, the isolation. That really was hard for me. Two, some of the teachings that were coming out were getting to me a little bit on the side of paranoia from
Mm.
the higher ups. Um, I over the years, I think I had a hard time that sometimes the rules changed according to what certain women were doing that upset certain heads.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Mhm.
basically it was based on somebody's personal
Yeah.
situation or something that somebody
So
didn't
he made
like,
the
and
law.
they would then turn it into a law or a rule.
Well, okay. Basically, according to the scriptures, there's 613 laws, but there's probably two or three times that many byproducts of those laws. You know what I'm saying? They
Right.
say, you can't do this, but you can't do this, this, and this either, because it's still part of that law. It's just not the actual statement of the law, but
Right.
Amendments.
it's a good word for it. I don't think that's what they call it in the scriptures, but that's pretty much what they are.
Right.
The rules on how to keep that law. But my basic statement is, okay, we're human. And though the son was born, he is the only man to ever walk the earth who didn't question, who didn't sin, who didn't do anything. So how does the house expect all these other people to keep these 613 laws when there's only been one man to ever do it? They need to
Right.
understand that the laws are there as a guide, and we have to just be careful.
Well,
And
and it also says he will forgive you 7 times 70.
I believe that, and I believe that in the end, if you ask for forgiveness, you will always get it.
Well, I depend on
okay.
that 490 times a day. I depend on
Oh, you always did.
that. Yes. Yes.
So,
But yeah,
Um,
oh, I was just
Go
gonna.
ahead.
I have a second part to my question, Mel. You are kind of a valuable asset to the House of Yahweh because of your medical experience and education. Was
Absolutely.
there anyone
Yes.
there that had any similar training that was actually able to fill that gap once you left? Do you
now when
know?
yes, there was one still there, but she left less than a year after I did.
Wow.
So they're really they're now. I'll back up on that statement, but one thing, there are a couple of people out there who are trained. I do not know if they are legally certified or legally trained
Right.
in the proper use of herbs and tinctures and that type of stuff.
Right.
But I don't know if she has any legal training or anything. But I know there is at least one person out there. I think there's two that have the herbal and natural healing training. But I don't know how deep into it they get or how much of it is strictly them teaching themselves. So I don't know. But as far as medically trained people, unless somebody has joined in the last few years, once the one after me left, there were no medically trained people
Okay.
that I am aware of.
In a talk that we had before when we started this, because I'm going to make this be my question, Mel, because she's basically answered the question I was going to
Yep.
ask.
Yep.
But I would like for her to reshare the story with everybody, just so they can get the full picture of a woman who was respected and in a lot of different positions, important positions, and had a friendship with not just Yisrael, but many elders and their families. When you did decide to leave, and you told us a story about when you would pack your car up, can you share that story and about the phone call that took place?
Okay. Well, first of all, on the finishing of this deal about why I ultimately left, the final decision was made. I worked for a company where I was a traveling nurse. and I traveled out of town. And I had traveled out of town. I was in Burleson, Texas. I had been there for. I got there at 7:30 in the morning. If you don't know how long that took me being up, that's like a 3 hour, 2.5, 3 hour drive from here, or from Abilene. I no longer live in Abilene, so I have to remember it's not from here. But it was, and I drove there. I was there, and I didn't get home till like 10 o'clock that night. My counselors were at my house when I got home at 10 o'clock at night, wanting to know what I'd been doing. That a Kahan had seen me and my husband at Olive Garden in Abilene, and I'm like, I wasn't in Abilene today. I left here at 3:14 this morning. I was not in Abilene today. And she said something else. I said, look, I said, I can go get you 35 different signatures that I was in Burleson, Texas. I was not in Abilene, Texas with Royce. And they asked me to go do it. They asked me to go to each one of them, go back to Burleson, go to everybody I saw that day and get them to sign a piece of paper saying I was in Burleson, Texas, and that Royce wasn't with me.
Was that your final straw?
That was my final straw. No.
How old were you, Melody?
Huh?
How old were you?
At what time?
When they asked you to go do this?
50-something.
Just wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
And you had a career.
I was doing my job. So
right.
Then that leads to the story you were talking about.
Let me just add too that you were somebody that had a reputation there, a good reputation of being an honest person who wouldn't have to go out of her way to prove something like that, because they should have known you well enough and respected you well enough to know if you said that was not where you were, that was not where you were.
Well, I didn't go get the signatures. Now, legal, I could have, because it's the trip I would know I'd be making a couple more months. But I wasn't going to do it. And also, we found out that there was a truck that looked like my husband's at Olive Garden, and a car that looks like mine at Olive Garden. But they never, ever physically saw me or him.
Wow.
It's just a car that looked like I was parked there.
I'm actually going to skip one of our questions because we're down to 5 minutes. So I'm going to go with the last question here, Mel, and I'm going to say...
No, wait. She didn't get to tell the story, so we might have to do a part 3 because I need...
Okay, well then we'll finish up, and then we'll have to do a part 3 then, because we do have 2 more questions at least, so...
Yeah, that are pretty...
Still here. Okay. Well, this is going to be a 3-part then, for sure, because we're down to 4 minutes.
Yes, most definitely, because I need for her to share this story.
Okay, continue, Mel.
Okay.
Or do we want to start the 3rd part and her tell the story?
Yes, let's do that. We're gonna finish the story on part 3 for the first time ever on our show. A part 3 of somebody's interview.